I'm Val Quinn, and for those of you that are new, welcome to the channel. We actually looked at Samsung's top-of-the-range OLED TV here just before. That was the Q990F. So in this case, we have their Neo QLED model instead, which is a different setup. Also, the key thing here is that it's an 8K screen. And here's a question I really want to put forward is, why 8K? Because the other brands, Sony and LG, don't have 8K models in their lineup this year, but Samsung still does. So I'm really curious about whether it's worth it, whether it really offers something above and beyond. So stick around to the end of the video and I'll give you my thoughts on that. Well, let's jump straight into picture quality. So new this year versus last year is the chip inside the TV. So this is the HN-Q990F AI Gen 3 chip. And while it was a Gen 3 in last year's model, this year the neural nets have increased by 50%. So they were, I think, 512, and now they go up to 768. So why does that matter? Well, this TV, and I guess one of its claims to fame, is that even though it's an 8K panel and there's not a lot of 8K content, it uses AI to upscale 4K and HD content to that 8K panel size. And it does this not by simply doubling the pixels and not really adding new information. It does this using AI to identify different types of objects and shapes, and then it basically complements or adds information in as it upscales. So it sort of fills in the blanks to turn a 4K picture into, say, an 8K picture. So actually, in Samsung's kind of terms, everything that you're watching is 8K because it's actually turning it into 8K. It's not just upscaling it, it's actually adding information, filling in the blanks, and making it that way. So with this 8K panel, the idea is that you're really maximizing picture quality with that full resolution. Now, another thing to keep in mind here too is that this gets the same anti-glare or glare-free, as Samsung calls it, coating as the S95F. And what that does is it uses like a nano texture to diffuse the light, and it's great on OLED TVs because traditionally they have a very shiny panel. With a Neo Quantum one, it doesn't normally have that. It's got more of a substrate here and doesn't reflect as much, so the effect probably isn't as obvious. Here we've got all kinds of lights on the screen. I think that versus the OLED, it maybe seems to be a little more obvious, some of the reflections off of this one, but still it's quite good. So that means that you'd be really happy to use this in a very brightly lit living room or somewhere where the sun is pretty much shining right on it, and it should be able to punch through. Also, this is a very bright panel, so even with that as well, it will punch through those reflections. So it's good to have that extra coating. This one still maintains its Pantone color certification, so there's no color cast created by the coating. But look, some people like matte finish coatings like this one, some people don't. I don't think it detracts at all, and I think it's a good to have for those really brightly lit conditions. Look, there are so many picture enhancement technologies here that I don't think I can remember the names of them, so I'm just going to read them out. Look, there is Quantum Matrix Technology Pro. So this is the backlighting technology for this 8K TV. And it's really about giving you better blacks. It's because it is a mini LED TV. It's able to it has more dimming zones and the ability to really mask out the areas that are colored with the areas that aren't, giving you good contrast. There's Color Booster Pro, there's Auto HDR Remastering Pro, and of course there's Vision AI, which takes care of a whole suite of things like upscaling and sound enhancements using AI technology. And that really just adapts to what you're watching. It figures out what kind of scene it is and then decides what the best settings are, both visually as well as with sound tuning. In terms of black performance, I have to be honest, I do love the look of OLED blacks. They're just so much more sort of pure and inky. However, the QN990F does do an admirable job of it. I think you can see here there's lots of good color definition in these darker areas. Shadows are managed well. There's no artifacts or blooming that I've noticed on my testing. This is Mission Impossible here, sort of not the latest, but the one that's recently just come out. And then also I was watching Creator 2. So, you know, there's good levels of contrast there, and you do really get that sort of dark effect, and you're not losing a lot of details in the darks. I think Star Wars' Return of the Jedi is a great example about what this this TV can do, especially with this 8K panel. So this is a 4K version of it, but it's upscaling it to 8K. And there's a lot of grain in this depiction simply because it was recorded on film anyway. But what I found is that even though there's a lot of grain, there's no artifacts, so that 8K AI upscaling isn't getting confused by that. It's not adding anything that shouldn't be there, at least not from what I've seen. Also, I'm really impressed with certain scenes. For example, there's one with some grains of sand and others as well, especially Luke Skywalker's face while he's sitting in the X-Wing. I'm amazed at how much detail comes through, and that really shows that, you know, it's upscaling. There's a lot of clarity. It almost looks a bit super real. But remember, this is a film that was recorded, back in the 80s. So it is pretty impressive in this instance, and it really does show what the QN990F can do when it comes to watching movies. So with Reacher here, we can see some good examples of sort of mid-lit scenes, good color. It's nice and bright, vibrant colors, but the skin tones still retain sort of a nice realistic effect. Also, there's not a lot of grain with Reacher, so we're seeing sort of some quite sharp images as well. So yeah, this is kind of what you might see when you're just streaming kind of serial dramas with Netflix or with Amazon Prime. So AI helps adjust the screen for you, and there's an AI picture mode that does all of that depending on the content that you're watching. But now you can customize that and tune it to sort of your liking, and then it will recognize that type of genre and then apply your settings to it. So for example, I can kind of pop up this box here, and then I can go through and then customize the picture mode. I can say I want to be watching sport, or I want to watch a movie, or a general thing. And then you make these settings that kind of appeal to your tastes. And then whenever it identifies that you're watching sport, then it'll apply those settings. So what's interesting is that it can actually apply different settings within, say, the same show. So for example, if you're watching Ted Lasso, if it's just the normal stuff, it might apply the general settings, but then when Ted Lasso switches to more of a sports scene, then it'll dynamically apply your sport watching settings to that part of the scene. So I don't know if it'll all sort of come together cohesively or not, but it is an interesting setting, and of course you can turn it off. Another thing we noticed too is that straight on the picture looks one way, but we do see a little bit of a change or shift when you're looking at it off angle. Of course, with an OLED TV, you wouldn't have that effect. So in terms of looks, this is Samsung's Infinity Air design. And what it really means is that there's basically no borders. They're pretty much imperceptible. It is 13.3 millimeters thick. You know, that's not super thin, but I actually quite like the thickness because it really does give you a nice defined edge, and it looks quite premium the way they've got the metal kind of running around it. Speaker-wise, this is a 90-watt system, and it is a 6.2.4, meaning you've got up firing, center firing, front firing, and side firing to give you true Dolby Atmos. And there are a lot of different sound features built into this TV. I actually think it sounds surprisingly good just with the TV speakers itself, even without the soundbar. There is good separation between left and right, and I do kind of sense that upward firing sound, which kind of makes it feel like it's behind you. But of course, the soundbar will give you a much better effect there. I do like their Q Symphony feature, and that's where the speakers on the TV work in conjunction with the soundbar, but more on that later. Also, it does have object tracking sound, so that's when something moves across the screen. The speakers can compensate for that and actually make it seem like the object is flying across the screen like a helicopter or something like that. There is a central base stand. Feels pretty sturdy when you push it from the bottom, maybe a little bit more jiggly from the top, but look, I think it does the job. I do like the central stand. I kind of prefer that over having feet at the ends of the panel. Because this is a wide panel, being an 85-inch, you don't want it to have feet that are actually set further apart than your actual entertainment console, and nowhere to sit that on. Of course, you can wall mount this as well, and I think it will look great on a wall too. Of course, when our TVs are off, they do tend to look like giant black mirrors, especially big 85-inch models. So the art store has actually seen some enhancements this year. If you don't know, the art mode is basically, it puts like a picture on screen when you're not watching TV. You can also customize that and have, you know, your own family pics and that type of thing. So Samsung has an art store that now has some connections with Art Basel, which is modern contemporary stuff from all around the world. So now you have access to that too. If you have a subscription, there used to be about 1,200 pieces of art in that subscription service. Now there's about 3,000, so lots more to choose from. Also, if you don't have a subscription, that's okay too. You do get access to 30 sort of changing artworks per month, and that's about 360 per year. So you can actually just cycle through some nice artworks as well. But I kind of think this is a nice feature to have, and it just does make your living room look nice when you have a piece of art on there instead of just a black screen. So the gamers out there, this TV caters for you really well. So first off, this panel can actually manage 240 hertz or 240 frames a second if you're running in 4K mode. However, if you're in 8K, it can manage 120 hertz or 120 frames a second, which is fine for consoles like the Xbox Series X or PlayStation 5, etc. There's also a VRR or variable refresh rate and a lot of different gamer features. With AI, this will actually identify the gaming type you're playing and then tune to that gaming type automatically, so it could detect whether you're using a first-person shooter and then adapt the settings for you there, or real-time strategy and that type of thing, which is handy. Plus there's a game bar, which is an on-screen overlay that shows all of the different gaming settings, so you can actually keep an eye on it and make sure that the settings are the ones that you want. Of course, it supports cloud gaming too. You just hop over into the gaming menu and you can see all the different types of choices there, as well as the different cloud gaming services. Interestingly enough, I was curious about whether the 8K panel would upscale 4K games into 8K, because the Xbox and PlayStation can't do 8K games, and it would be really, really cool. However, it doesn't actually engage the special upscaling technology using object recognition and neural nets when you're gaming. So yes, gaming modes will switch on and it'll give you enhanced gaming features that way, but you're not going to get upscaling as part of that feature set. Sorry gamers, no 8K gaming through the TV. So what I really love is Samsung's One Connect box, but this is wireless on the QN990F. And that means that you can plug in devices like, say, your Xbox or your PlayStation or other things directly into here, and then this will transmit wirelessly to the TV panel, so you don't have to have a physical connection at all, so no cables or anything. And that's really impressive if you think about it, because this will be able to stream in 4K, 240 hertz, to that panel. It also can do obviously 8K streaming, but it's really amazing that it has that capability completely wirelessly. It will do 10 meters in range, and it doesn't have to be line of sight. So you can actually hide this in a cupboard or whatever and just completely get it out of the way. So if you're wall mounting, I think this is a fantastic solution. Look, for the techie people out there, one of the limitations here is that the HDMI, there's 4 HDMI 2.1 ports. One of the limitations is that this is only 40 gigabits per second, not 48, which is the maximum throughput for the HDMI 2.1 spec. I don't think that's going to matter to very many people. However, given that this is an 8K TV, if you wanted to, say, stream from a hard drive, full 444, high quality 8K video, straight to the TV, it could only do that at 40 gigabits a second, so you would have some limitations there. Also, I think that the network cable, this is a 100 megabits per second Ethernet port, not a 1 gigabit per second. That again is a bit slow if you want to stream 8K video from a NAS drive or a bunch of hard drives on your network to the panel. So I think this is really great. It opens up a lot of cable-free possibilities. However, it does have some limitations in terms of bandwidth. To get that really big sound effect, you have Samsung's Q-Series. This is the HW-Q990F soundbar. So this has 23 speakers. It's 11.1.4 channels, wireless Dolby Atmos, so you got your front firing, side firing, up firing. Look, I've been trying it out. I've been actually watching Creator with it. There's this great scene where the Americans roll into town. They've got these heavy tanks, lots of explosions. It really does have great separation, lots of heavy bass, because there is a new sub that comes with this. Now this sub's interesting because it's 40% smaller than the older model, and I actually had the older model and it's quite big, and it uses 2 8-inch woofers, one on either side, and it actually has AI that dynamically adjusts these subwoofers as they work in conjunction, because sometimes some distortion can get created by the 2 subs, so it figures out how to reduce that distortion. I'm impressed with how big the sound is from such a little box. Overall, the soundbar has plenty of advanced features. I mean, it's really designed to work quite well with Q Symphony here, so that uses the TV speakers as well as this. It has some rears as well. There's 2 rears, but overall, look, it really does enhance the experience. I think they've done a great job this year. It sounds fantastic too. Okay, so the QN990F costs $13,799 here in Australia. Of course, you'll probably be able to get that cheaper as time goes by. But look, what do we think? So I think first off, this is their premium 8K panel. Look, you don't have to go for 8K, and this is Samsung's way of staying ahead of the curve, as well as providing you with some future proofing as well for when more 8K content comes out. I mean, look, the argument there is that when you're sitting 3 meters away, you might not even notice the difference between a 4K screen and an 8K screen, but as you move closer, obviously the detail in an 8K screen is going to be better. Look, I think that for people who really know what to look for and really want the ultimate in picture quality, this TV can deliver that. But also it's a matter of personal taste too. Like for me, OLED is my favorite type of look. This has bright colors. I mean, it's fantastic in terms of what it can produce. However, I really like that OLED look with those dark blacks. So I guess you have to factor that in as well. Ultimately, I guess at the end of the day, this is Samsung's top of the range screen. It does have a premium price. 85 inches is the only size that you can get. And look, for those out there that really want a TV that delivers in all kinds of different environments, plus it actually has pretty good sound built into the panel as well, I think this is a good choice. So there's our first take of the Samsung 8K QN990F, as well as the Q990F soundbar as well. It is a great combination too. They work together really, really well. So tell us what you think in the comments. Is a mini LED your type of TV, or do you prefer OLED? What do you think about the anti-reflective coating? And actually, I really do love that wireless One Connect box. That is actually a very cool thing to have. Channel's really been growing, and we'd love to get your feedback too about what kinds of videos you'd like to see. But otherwise, we will catch you in the next video.